This story happened to my father back in the 80s. I will be telling this story in the first person just to make it easier to tell. My father always brings this up when asked a scary story and a warning to always lock your doors no matter where you live. And maybe even invest in a dog or a security system. Anyways, on with the story. When I was 23, I got my first house in a town with literally no crime. The worst crime that ever happened here was a drunk being loud and disturbing the peace. But other than that, there was no crime. Even my wife, then girlfriend, who is 5'2" and 100 pounds soaking wet, would walk up to the local gas station in the middle of the night without a care in the world. I never made it a priority to lock my door. I still would lock it, but it wasn't something that was important. This night made me change my perspective on locking doors, though. I got home from work and did the usual. Grab a beer, watch some TV, and just unwind. I worked 12-hour shifts, so when 9 o'clock rolled around, I walked like a zombie to bed and passed out almost the second my head hit the pillow. I was asleep for a few hours when I got woken up to what sounded like a creaking door. The closet right by my front door was really loud, and I knew exactly what door it was that was open. I've lived in that house for almost a year at that point, and have never heard it open by itself like that. I waited in bed hoping and praying that it was just a dream. But I was awake, and at that point, and I heard the same closet door close, followed by slow footsteps. There was somebody in my house. I didn't own a gun, and this was before cell phones. And I wasn't about to go out there and confront whoever it was. The only thing I could think to do was pretend to be asleep and hope whoever it was would just leave me alone. Hearing unknown footsteps through my house in the middle of the night was and still is the most terrifying sound I've ever heard. And to my horror, the footsteps got louder and louder. And then they stopped. Right at my bedroom door. It took everything in me to calm my shaking and panic, and to sit still and pretend to be asleep. I was already terrified knowing someone was in my house, but now they were right in my bedroom doorway, just watching me. After what felt like hours, I heard the footsteps making their way away from me and towards the kitchen where my front door was, and eventually out the front door. As soon as I heard that front door close, I hurried up, locked it, and shut any blinds I could in every window in my house, and then called the police. I wasn't able to see who it was, and they were long gone by at that point, so the cops weren't really able to do anything. The only thing missing was my VCR, which was the only time in my life that I'm glad it was just a burglar instead of some maniac with a knife. I hope this story scares you into making sure you lock your doors, because next time it might not be just a burglar. Next time it could be a maniac with a knife, or even a burglar who would kill you if you caught him. Always lock your doors. Even if you know your doors are locked, check them again. There's no such thing as being too safe. I know most people are gonna assume I was drugged out or insane when I tell this story, but I swear on everything I own that this happened to me. I was 10 when it happened at a family reunion camping trip. Every few years, my grandparents set up a big reunion with all my extended family, ranging from cousins to third and fourth cousins, where we camp out in the woods near a lake for the whole weekend. We usually camp at the same place, but this year the place we normally go to was being used. So this new camp, it was set up with a long winding road that led you down a deep wooded area. After maybe 5 minutes, you reach this open area of the woods where everyone had their tents set up. Then down this little hill, it led you to the beach. The beach wasn't nothing special, just a small sandy area and a dock. Typical lake. It was getting dark out, and at the time, there was only a handful of people left outside just sitting in the beach and talking and doing whatever. My parents were still up and weren't going to bed anytime soon, so I just went back to the tent by myself. I wasn't too scared because there was a bunch of people near, and our tent was near my cousins, who I love. I went to sleep for a little bit, but got woken up. Something was weird though. You know how when you wake up, whether it be getting a full night's sleep or getting woke up in the middle of the night, you wake up to your eyes being closed and then you open them. It's hard to explain, but you know when you wake up. Here's the thing. I didn't remember waking up until later. At the time, I just remember going to sleep and then boom, awake. Similar to when the doctor sedates you before surgery. I didn't take any drugs or drink anything that would cause such a weird thing. Plus, I was only 10 years old. But at the time, I was in a state of confusion. I didn't know where I was, almost like I'd been drugged out or just dropped off at some random campsite. There was no sound at all. Even though I could see the silhouette of the fire on the tent, there was no sound. No crackling wood, no wind, nothing. I called for my parents, but there was no sound in my voice as well. I could feel the force of my voice and the vibration in my chest, but I couldn't hear my own voice. Even when I sat up to look around, I didn't hear the sound of me moving. Everything was silent. I don't know if it's because I'm used to having my parents around me 24/7, but I remember getting this feeling that they were close by, and I exited my tent to try and get them for help. I stepped out of my tent, and no one was there. No tents, no cars, no people. I was all alone in the middle of the night, in the middle of the woods, with no recollection on how I got there or where I am. Remember that long winding road I mentioned earlier? Well, when I looked down the road, I saw a silhouette. It didn't look like a normal person, and it was dark. But from what I saw, the person or thing was at least 10 feet tall. It had the body shape of a human, but the height was the only thing keeping this thing or person from looking normal. You know the term frozen with fear? Well, I truly know what that means because I felt like I couldn't move. I was stuck, terrified, in a state of complete confusion and terror. This thing started to walk towards me. It moved in such an uncanny way. It was moving slow, but it had this disturbing twitch with every step it took. I started screaming and crying for someone, anyone, to please fucking help me. I fell down face first and then woke up. I woke up to my father shaking me and screaming for me to answer him, with my mother and aunt and uncle behind him, looking visibly scared. Even though I was awake, I felt so delirious and had a hard time telling them what had happened. I guess what they could get out of me scared them enough that they brought me to the nearest hospital that night. By the time I reached the hospital, I was fully aware and awake, and explained to my father what had happened. And while at the time he thought it was a nightmare, he was still worried. He said him and my mom tried waking me, but I wouldn't respond. Even after lifting me up and shaking me, I would not respond. The doctors ran me through every brain test they could that night and found nothing wrong with me. The only conclusion they could come up with was that I possibly had a seizure. I'm still concerned with a few things. One, I've never had a seizure before or after this incident. And two, I could tell that I was awake. We've all had those dreams where we swear we're awake. But after you wake up, you realize it was a dream. Even after being fully awake and in the hospital, I knew I was awake that whole time. My parents decided to take me home for that night, and we never returned. And after all that, I've never had anything like this happen to me again.